to the Fertility Season 3. This morning, we are chatting with Emily Feit. Emily is a licensed clinical social worker living in Los Angeles with her 3 children, husband, and dog. Emily went through several rounds of IVF as well as surrogacy and recently published a children's picture book called Before We Held You in Our Arms. Emily and her husband also launched Feit for Kidz, an interest-free loan program to assist in alleviating the financial burden of IVF. So far, they have provided over $4.5 million in loans for over 300 IVF and surrogacy projects. Welcome, Emily. We are so honored to have you on the show this morning.
Thank you, guys. It's an honor for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh my goodness, of course. Yeah. Honestly, if you just want to start from the beginning and just kind of tell us like how you started all of this and just kind of when you got married, is this when you knew? And I just start from the beginning. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, great. So my husband is Alan. We got married back in 2008. And going into marriage, I'm so excited at the wedding, but I always knew since the age of 16 that I would have a problem getting pregnant. So I remember going to the OB when I was a teen because I got my period very late. And the OB looked at me and said, when you want to get pregnant, it's going to be difficult. And at 16 years old, that meant nothing to me. Like, okay, I'm 16, I'm in high school, it doesn't matter, but it sort of just stuck with me my entire life. But I sort of, filed it in the back of my head, didn't think of it. You think, more than the doctor at that age, like you're in charge, you're the expert as a teenager. Got married about a year after our wedding, and about, I would say, summer of 2009. We said, okay, let's start. Let's just try, it's a year. We'll just see, we'll have fun. And of course, nothing happened. And then I decided about 6 to 8 months later, so we're already my math is not great, into 2010. Actually, it might have been late 2009. We decided to start talking to my personal OB about, what the next steps were going to be. And she put me on, I think it was Clomid, and to try and, stimulate and see what would happen. I think I did, gosh, this is so long ago, maybe 2 rounds or 2 months of it. And actually, my own family members, my sister and many people that I knew had gone on to see the reproductive endocrinologist. And I'd always been told, like, if you're having trouble, go already, make that appointment, have that consultation. Like, don't wait. There's no reason for it. So we went to the doctor and, gave him my history, kind of let him know that I suffer with polycystic ovarian syndrome. So I said, here, nice to meet you. Here's my issues.
Yeah.
You help me. We want to start a family. And we decided to go with IUIs. We did 2 IUIs unsuccessful. But I wasn't worried at that point. I was kind of like, oh, there wasn't a good chance. Anyway, I knew that I would probably need to do in vitro. So I don't remember exactly the date, but we were eager. We were on a path. We were determined. We had this timeline, we weren't going to wait a long time. We were gung ho. We're going to do this. And so we did the first in vitro. And the first in vitro, I remember the doctor saying to me, there's this thing called the testing of the embryos. And it was PGD, which was very new at that point. And my own father is a physician. He's not a reproductive endocrinologist, but he's a pediatrician. He was kind of like, what? Like, there's only, 8 cells. And like, what are you doing? You're going to touch one. It was new. And it sort of seemed very risky. So while that was suggested to me to have, the best embryo selection with a PGD, it was also something that was very new and very unfamiliar, and it seemed very risky. And IVF you're supposed to have a good chance, right? To be able to, it's a beauty contest. I remember them telling me, like, this is grade A. This is the one that we're going to implant. So we did not do PGD. That was actually a very big regret of mine. that we did not do that. But I understand it was not only my decision, it was my husband and I's decision, and we decided not to go forward with it. We transferred one embryo. It actually did implant, but at 6 weeks, I had my, I think it was a chemical pregnancy, and I was devastated because you go in there, right, thinking like, this is great technology. It's supposed to work. Like,
and then it does work, and you're only like a couple weeks in, and you're like, what just happened?
Yeah.
So gutted, even though, and people, I'm sure you guys have the same experience. People are like, "Ah, everybody has a miscarriage. Like, this is normal. It's only 6 weeks." And I'm like, that seemed very dismissive, right? Like,
Absolutely.
you have done so much lead up, right? Like, you've met with the doctor and you did all these injections, and you're not feeling like emotionally that stable and confident, right? And you're bruised up. There's so much that's already led up to it. And you have these like highs, and then you have this complete low. There was such like a differentiation between the emotions. You're at highs, you're at lows. You don't know how to process this all. And there's all these like new terms, like you're learning like a brand new language.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
When you're going through this, when it's not being talked about on the internet.
Exactly.
And so I thought it was so interesting that you said like friends were even telling you like, yeah, just go ahead and go to your reproductive endocrinologist. Like, I feel like that was such educated advice back in 2010, 2011. But I think I always say it, any miscarriage is devastating and horrific. However, I think when you've gone through like the third party assistance to get pregnant and then you have that loss, it's like even more gutting of like, oh my gosh, I finally could breathe because I got the positive pregnancy test. And now just days later, I too, Emily, had a chemical pregnancy with our first round of IVF.
Same. So you totally relate. I mean, it's like this shared understanding, right? Like that, it was just like deep in your heart. It's like someone took like a knife. You're like, what? I did all this work, right? That's how we're raised. Like, work hard, do all of your like, prep work, and it's gonna work.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. And it's like, what? I was here last week, it was fine. And then what happened in that week? Did I do something? Right? Like all that self-blame, and even talking about it, right? Like stirs up those emotions. Even, gosh, 15, 14, my math is terrible, as you can see, 13 to 14 years later. It still really stings.
It does.
Yeah. So actually at that point, I was upset. And who do you displace all of your anger at? The doctor. It's the doctor's fault, right? Like, I'm upset. I was like, oh, it's not going to work. Like, blah, blah, blah. I'm dealing with all of these emotions. We actually ended up moving doctors to someone who was actually local, but like, it was again, like a drive, like 30 minutes. I would have to go in between work. I did 2 more cycles with him, IVF. And because I have polycystic, PCOS, I get a lot of eggs, a ton of eggs, right? Like, they were like, wow, like 35 eggs. I'm like, no, that's dangerous, right? To overstimulate, a hyperstimulated. Those 2 were obviously a wash, but I got really sick because I was so bloated, and I was like harvesting between 30 and 40 eggs per cycle. And none of them were good at all. So I actually remember we decided at that point, we're like, oh, we have the regret, we should have done PGD. And I remember the phone call that I received where it was like, you had 10 embryos and all of them were abnormal.
Wow.
So it's like, you're going, not only are you not successful in your cycles, right? Then you're getting these like added news, like you're running tests. You're like, okay, you're going from maybe we chose the wrong embryo, right, in the first cycle, to now like, what
all of them were, and Amanda can relate to that. I mean, you had the same situation.
Yeah, every single time all of our embryos were abnormal.
There you go. Isn't that such a devastating? You're like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah,
like
100%.
Oh, I know. It's just like, as a woman, right? You're like, this is something I'm supposed to be able to do, right? It's like given right, we have this gift, we can bring child into the world, and we're the barrier, right? You take
Yeah.
so much on you. You start just, it's like deep into your soul where you're like, I'm the one that's preventing this from happening. You take so much of it on your shoulders. There's just so much emotion that's wrapped up into it. So at that point, I remember that the previous doctor sent us a handwritten letter, and it was just out of the blue. He was like, I haven't heard from you guys in a while. Like, I was thinking of you, which I thought was like such a personal touch. So nice. That's
That's
always
so sweet.
so nice. Like the doctors barely have time to like go in and see the patients, but like to write a handwritten note, it's like, okay. So that we actually returned back to him, and he actually was the one who eventually ended up getting me pregnant. But between cycle 4 and cycle 7, which,
Wow.
yeah, oh my gosh,
Wow.
it was honestly, it's all a blur to me now. Like there was in those next 4 cycles, it was like frozen transfer. There was one where I had a leading follicle, and they ended up doing switching at the last minute from IVF to IUI. And it actually, I remember him being like, "You have a leading follicle." And I was like, okay, that's great. You always want someone to be a leader, right? No, that
It
is
does, isn't that when one's growing a lot faster than the other? So it's like it's gonna ovulate way before the others, and to your
correct.
point, you have to switch.
Right. It's like a bad listener, and it's like a hog, right? It's like taking all the medicine. And I'm like, well, don't you want someone in charge? No. So they switched to an IUI, like all the stuff that like we're supposed to, like we're taught, right? Like leader and, work hard. It doesn't apply in the reproductive endocrinology world, like the IVF infertility world. So it's all backwards to change your mentality. And so that one, actually, I got a positive pregnancy test, and it was like so bizarre. I'm like, wait, this wasn't supposed to work. And I believe that was, I think it was cycle 6 at that point. Again, some of it, I feel like I blocked out of my mind, but there are specific incidents where I remember like this was like, it was like a miracle. And I went for week 7, week 8, like ultrasounds, and everything was progressing like beautiful. Like you saw the heart, you heard the heartbeat, you saw what was it, like the sac with the what is like that, I forget.
The yolk sac and the fetal pole.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say there's a pull, but then that didn't sound right. Yes, thank you. And then we went in for the appointment before you like graduate and you're supposed to be released. And I was like I was so positive. I was excited. This was like a miracle with the leading follicle. And, he takes the ultrasound and he turned white, like a ghost. And I'm like, that's not a good sign. And
Oh,
it didn't, that was a miscarriage. And it was the point in time where I really felt I saw the like human side of this whole infertility business, where it was like he was devastated. Like, not okay, we were a wreck, and he was like, he's so invested. Like, we don't talk about that. Like, how does this, maybe that's a great idea for a podcast. Like, how, right? Like, how did the
uh,
doc, right? Like, how do they deal with this? Like, yes, I understand it's a job, and I get it, it's a business, but like there is a human side to like, how do you deliver bad news, and how,
Yeah.
and real time, right? Like
I
he's
mean, right
getting the
there.
same news as like he has no time to process that. That's a really interesting topic we haven't
That's
delved
true.
into.
Yeah, we really haven't talked about
I'm
that.
100% listening. I'm interested. It's like, how do you maintain professionalism and composure in all of this, right? And what do you say? Like, especially when there's been so much investment, like it's horrible. So I actually needed not only a DNC but a D&E, where they had to put like the reeds like this, I don't know, to expand the cervix, because I wasn't so far, but like it wasn't a chemical
Yeah.
pregnancy.
Yeah.
So at that point, I'm like, that was horrific. That was horrific. So we ended up realizing basically that my body doesn't do well with fresh transfers. So we ended up and that was actually, that I remember the date shockingly, that was August of 2011. And at that point, that was IVF number 6, but plus with the IUIs and the this and the hysteroscopy and the every blood test and like you're a pincushion, right? It's like, okay, test me. Like, what is going on here, right? And as you see, all of your friends are getting pregnant, right? I'm sure you guys have this too. So I'm like, you just got married like
Yeah.
3
Right.
years
The
ago.
honeymoon
They looked at
pregnancy.
their husband, got pregnant.
Ugh,
Yeah.
I'm like, you know,
good for you.
did you guys, I would walk into the fertility clinic, but I'd send my husband in before me to like scope out who was there. Cause I was
That's
like,
so,
"Oh, like a walk
yeah,
team
So
at-"
smart.
that's smart. Yeah. And you're like, I don't want to see the success fertility patients today.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, 100%. I was like, oh, so, we ended up, the doctor basically, at that point, I was emotionally like, I'll say that I was a wreck. Like I was so devastated. Like I went into this like deep, dark depression to the point where like my in-laws were very worried about me because I was so depressed. I was so upset. Like you got to this point where like but I'm doing everything. Like I'm a good listener, right? Like I'm taking all the advice. I make good all the appointments. Like I'm
Like there's nothing else to do. Like you're like, well, I don't know what to do
Right,
at this point. I've
everything.
done everything and I'm still not getting the outcome.
100%. You're like, I hit a brick wall. What am I supposed to do? And you feel like you only see darkness ahead of you. So he basically, what he said to my husband, go away, like leave, like go anywhere in the world, like get out of here. He's like, you need just like a clearing of the head, of the mind. And when you're ready, like, obviously you have to come back and discuss what next steps are going to be. So basically, we had frozen embryos and we decided like we needed to make, I guess I forget what the actual term was, but my uterus needed to be like receptive, like it needed to be calm and not like like it needed to basically be stimulated and then rest and then ready to receive. So this is where the story gets interesting. So it was November of 2011, and it was the night before the transfer. So we went away in August. So between August and November, we decided to do the frozen transfer. We decided to transfer 3 frozen embryos, which is like
Like they
dad.
don't even do that anymore, I feel like. But to
I-
your like you're so deep in your journey, they're like, let's try
Ah.
it all.
Yes, 100%. At one point during those first 6, they transferred 5 embryos, which was,
What?
I
Wait,
know.
stop it. That's wild.
My mom just reminded me of that. She was like, do you remember? But because they were not, what the philosophy was at that point, it was like they were not growing nicely in the lab. And they were like, maybe they'll be happier in your uterus. So, instead of like we were going to wait till day 5 to transfer at the blastocyst, but at day 3, they put in 5.
That's
Knowing that,
like I know when I signed the forms in 2021 or something, there was like 7 stipulations to even transfer 2. Like you had to be a certain age, a certain number of failure, a certain this, a certain that.
here.
Yeah.
I'm actually really glad that that's
Yeah.
because
They won't do it for me. They wouldn't. I asked to transfer 2 and they said no.
Just
no
because of the
way.
because of the high
I have
risk
lupus, so I was
of
high
the-
risk. So they were like, no, not doing it.
it's
Yes,
very regulated now.
Yeah, that's wild though. 5. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's insane. That's
Oh my God, you guys, really? Is that like
yeah.
a federal shows what I know?
So I actually work in OBGYN, and so
Oh,
it's I know. And
that's
so it's
awesome.
actually for the health of the mother. They say like the mother is our patient first,
Yes.
and we want live birth. Like our outcome is a live birth. And if we're transferring 5, we're putting the mother at risk. The pregnancy is going to be much higher risk, triplets as we get into your story, you're higher risk when you have multiples. So that's why they do that.
So now it's only one transfer. It's one embryo, but unless
There's options to do 2, and I think it depends on the clinic. And there may be options to do 3. I didn't have that in any of my paperwork. It was very specific. It was 8. There was an age stipulation, a number of failed trial stipulation. You had to have certain health metrics at the clinic that I was at.
Oh, same with mine.
Amazing. Actually, that eases my heart because you're right. It is risky to the mother's help, to the mother's help, not help, excuse me.
Yeah.
But absolutely. It's so interesting how things actually change and transform as they learn more.
Mhm.
And that's it's as it should be. But it's so interesting when I haven't, my twins are almost going to be 12, but it just shows you how much has changed in the last like 10 plus years,
Oh
which is
yeah.
Oh,
it's fantastic. Um,
So you have twins?
okay, yeah, so back up. Okay, so they
Okay, so
split in three.
November,
yeah,
yeah,
sorry,
November
we like went
2011.
from IVF to like I have twins who are almost 12. I'm sorry. Okay.
No, I love it.
You know,
People are
You're
like, okay, I gotta keep
spoiler
listening.
alert, spoiler.
I love it.
sorry, spoiler alert is right. Okay, so it's the night before the transfer, and basically we're like, this is it. This has to work. Like I told my husband, like, I'm done. Like, that's it. Like, I cannot do this anymore. Like, we're throwing everything at this. So, and we're not like, we're not like religious or spiritual people, but we were hopeful and we were desperate at that point. So basically, he said that it's interesting. I only heard this till after the fact, but he was basically like, the amount of money that we spent on in vitro ourselves, and we were lucky enough to be able to do that. We are going to go ahead and donate that specific amount of money to people who want to start a family, and the financial component is it's inhibiting their ability to fulfill their dreams. So I feel just in general, like a lot of people make these like promises, like I'm going to do this. And if I get pregnant, or if this works out, or if I get an A on my test, I'm going to do this. Or if, he was like, no, he's like, if this works, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and we're going to do this. So I'll put that aside for like a few seconds. So we ended up transferring three. I had one of them vanished, like I think around 8, 9 weeks. I had a really rocky pregnancy, which is bizarre. I don't know how your pregnancies were, but I'm like, oh, I did all the hard work. It was I was so sick
Mine
that,
was
That
horrific.
was
Amanda's was
Kat.
beautiful.
That was Kat. I'm sorry.
oh my God,
But it's
really?
interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to your point. Everybody's like, you've been through hell and back and you get a horrific pregnancy. It's not supposed to work that way.
No,
I feel,
surely you get a break. Like,
yeah. I'm like, something's got to give. We've done so much. Like, we should be like kind of rewarded with like that really easy, beautiful pregnancy. No, not. Were you sick the whole time?
I had hyperemesis at 5.5 weeks until she came out. And then it was like we ended up getting like at high risk diagnosis through the pregnancy that ended up being absolutely nothing. It's like, it could be this, but you could also deliver her and she'd be perfectly healthy. So it was just like, you go through the ups and downs. And I hear you had like I was going to say vanishing twin, which I guess technically it is with
Or
three,
triplet?
triplet. And so you're like getting these like bad news as you go, and you're like, am I ever going to make it to the 40 weeks? Am I ever going to deliver these babies?
100%. You're like, you think, okay, the worry is going to end once you
once you
get a
got
positive pregnancy test. No, it doesn't happen, right?
The worry is probably still there 12 years later of those, you're like,
oh, I'm
Oh,
sure. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. That's like, yes, you're spot on. So I had it was a very difficult pregnancy. I also was obviously like high risk. I had, oh gosh, I remember a double amniocentesis because there was excess fluid, amniotic fluid. They told me there's the potential for Down syndrome. Like it was,
you had polyhydramnios, right? Is that that's what I had? Yeah.
here.
Yeah. And they like finally, they didn't diagnose me till later. So I didn't have the amniocentesis because that's a little bit earlier in your pregnancy. But they're like, it could be a really bad genetic abnormality, or she could be fine.
You're like, gee, thank you. That really makes me feel better.
And we
I'm,
won't know until she's here.
yes,
Yeah.
I
Stay
know.
calm. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
great.
Exactly. Like, what are you supposed to do with that information? Like, it's not like you can just dismiss it. You have to
And
you,
Google's not your friend, and probably different like back then, but even now you Google and it's like it would be really rare if it wasn't anything. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I
Oh,
know.
thanks. That's helpful.
Exactly. And then people are like, say it was WebMD, I remember back then.
Yeah.
I'm like, but even after I thought that the amniocentesis was fine, it still was like I had bleeding. I ended up on the high risk unit, like in the hospital for 22 days because I went into preterm labor, which it's interesting. That was like
Oh
the
my
best
gosh.
pregnancy. Don't ask. I'm like a crazy person. At 30 weeks, they admitted me. And I was like, thank you. I said to the OB, she's like,
Yeah.
you go home. I'm like, no, I'm staying here because I would sometimes I wouldn't feel them. And sometimes like then I would bleed. And I was like, oh my God, like what you're just a wreck, right?
Yeah.
That's the only way. And I was like, I have nurses at the station. There's doctors. Like I left the monitors on. I'm like, don't take them off. Like I was the crazy
Well,
patient.
because you finally got that far. You're like, I finally am pregnant and I'm finally growing these babies. Yeah, I'll do anything to just bring them
Yeah.
earthside.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm like staying here. I like it here. I was like, I feel at ease. Like, and it's also your mental health, right? Like, yeah, this is such like an important part of it. And I feel certainly that it transfers even during like pregnancy. Like that is not a good stress to put onto your babies. I was the worst. I was such a wreck. It was so nerve-wracking,
Yeah.
even with the fetal monitors and the nurses outside. So what ended up happening is I actually ended up getting, you guys are gonna think like I'm making the story up, but I swear on my life, I'm not. I got E. coli in the hospital, like from a bad lab draw, and and it went into like the bloodstream and into the
Oh my
it,
gosh.
it was
Oh,
crazy.
wow.
So I ended up getting really sick, and basically I needed to have an emergency C-section at 33 weeks, 4 days. And the kids, they were 4 pounds, 3 ounces, 4 pounds, 1 ounce. And they were in the NICU for roughly 3 weeks, just for like, the breathing and the sucking and the feeding. But thankfully they were okay, they're healthy. And that was the story of the twins. It was crazy. Like,
And were
Wild.
you sick like after the birth? Were you still sick and just, oh my
so
gosh.
when I actually had to be transfused with 2 liters of blood, it was like, I'm like, is this a joke? Like, as if the like all of this. No, afterwards, thankfully, I was okay. I mean, the recovery, like I don't know if you guys had C-sections or
I did, yeah.
not, not an easy recovery. I don't
Yeah.
know how yours was. Did your nausea and vomiting clear up as soon as you delivered?
I did literally within, oh, sorry. I would say
No,
mine
no,
did. I don't know
no.
if it did.
No, well, you're the one that had like all the you're vomiting. Like,
Yeah, hyperemesis is
right.
bizarre. Like I'm telling you, I threw up my entire labor. Like they're like, we've never seen someone throw up like this. And in a second, like within the second, it all went away after 9 months of it.
That's
But
wild.
yeah,
It's crazy what our bodies go through and what we've sacrificed, right? Like before we've given birth. But I remember when they were in the NICU, and this kind of ties into the book, I remember like looking at them and holding them and being like, you have no idea what we went through to have you. Like we went through 7 rounds of in vitro injections, like the emotional ups and downs, like it was a strain on our relationship. Like there was so much emotion that was tied into all of this. And we went to the ends of the earth just so we could finally have you. Like these are conversations that we had when they were, in the incubators. Like, this was the messages, because you're starting to, I felt like I needed to regain control. Like, here you are, you're finally here. I want you to know how much I love you. And you don't even like, you were born, 6 hours ago. So
Yeah.
it's
It's
all like, I'm going to regain control. Like, I wanted you, I felt like not victorious, but I felt like I was able to I had to make it positive for myself. I'm like, I guess I felt like I was I was victorious. Like we were able to do this.
Finally
Oh, you're like,
did it.
we did this. You're
We did
here. Like, we've got this now. Yeah.
great, 100%. So that's the twins are now almost, like I said, almost 12. That's like here they are in the NICU, and now we fast forward. And then a few years later, when the kids were around 3 years old, I think around it must have been 2.5 to 3 years old. I'm like, I need a singleton. Like I didn't know what it was like to have one child. Like I felt like, I didn't feel like our family was complete. So we ended up doing 2 more in vitros. And we froze them because we knew like I couldn't accept like a fresh transfer. The first one, I ended up having only one embryo, which was PGD tested normal boy. And I'm like, okay, let me go back for a second round. Like, let's just see. Did it again a few months later, when you're able to go through IVF again. And at that point, I didn't get any normal embryos, nothing. So we're like, okay, we have one tested normal embryo frozen, and went back to the doctor, same doctor, the one that wrote the note.
Oh.
And he's like, okay, let's start preparing your uterus to receive this embryo. And it ended up that he's like, as much progesterone and hormones that I'm putting you on, he's like, you are so scarred from the twin pregnancy. He basically said to me, he's like, think of this beautiful lawn, right? And no matter how much fertilizer and seeds and sunlight and water, he's like, if you cut a hole in it, it's never going to look the same. He's like, that's your uterus. He's like, you had such a terrible pregnancy. He's like, the fact that you like came out alive and the twins are okay is a miracle. He's like, I would not risk it, as you were saying, to the mother's life. That was like 3 years later. So a lot had changed in that point. He's like, I recommend that you get a surrogate. And I was like, great. Like,
Sign me up.
I was like, wonderful. Like, I think obviously it would have been different had I didn't have that experience. And if there was, if thankfully a financial position had been different. So I don't want to take it for granted or say like, oh, this is a welcome opportunity. Like it was. Looking back, I'm like, I'm so blessed. She was wonderful. We have my son is 8. His name is Levi. He was born by a surrogacy. Like, I'm so grateful. I think these women who are surrogates are the ultimate sacrificers. They are incredible. Thank God for them. But at the same time, like it is a loss, like that you're not able to carry. You're sharing your pregnancy. There is that element of worry, right? You're like, I don't know what she's doing. Like, you're not there for every like
But
kick.
what year was this? I'm gonna assume like what, 2015?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you're awesome.
Well,
Yeah.
that's still so new. Like we've actually had a ton of surrogate podcasts, I feel like, this season. And we had Surrogacy Is. Are they based in LA? Maybe we've had a couple.
I think
It's called Surrogacy Is, and it's so cool. But we can tag the surrogacy episode here. But so I'm interested just quickly, like in 2015, how'd you find a surrogate? Did your clinic help you with that? Was it hard?
So the quick answer is during that whole like 2.5, 3 year process, when we're trying to conceive the twins, I'm like, we thought maybe it was that I couldn't carry. So we had met with them in that chunk of time. So we went back to them. We already had an established profile. And it was crazy. This surrogate that we ended up using, this amazing woman, she had matched with another family and that fell through. And so she was like, she had matched and it fell through. And so she was like lingering. They were like, we want to match her. She's a great fit. And it just happened to be, it was luck.
Oh, wow.
So it was, and she lived like in 2 hours from us. So it wasn't across the country. And she would send pictures and videos, and we came to all our appointments. So she, to me, was a lifesaver. I wouldn't have had my 3rd child if it wasn't for her. I'm so grateful to her.
Yeah. And I'm going to make the assumption too, your one boy embryo worked the first time.
That's wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I think, I guess like for me, if I would have been in your shoes and having the option of a surrogate, knowing like, okay, I have my 2 girls, love a boy, right? And you have this one embryo, the surrogate's almost like, I don't know if I can do it on the first try, but maybe this person that doesn't have a history of loss or a history of, it just not working. Maybe that's like even a higher percentage that it's going to work with my one embryo.
She had had success. She had been a previous surrogate. I mean, there was all these elements that were so positive. And I'm like, he's going to be happier and have a higher chance of survival with like, why risk it? This was a gift that I was given, which was,
Beautiful.
That's
yeah, it's
incredible.
cool.
That's
Okay, so your
cool.
book, did your book idea and all that well, it sounds like it got started in the NICU, but did it come to fruition after your son, before? What does that look like?
It was like, you talk about like COVID babies. That was like my COVID book, my
Oh,
COVID
I
baby.
love that.
So basically, I'll make it really short because I know that was really lengthy, but basically, I'm a licensed clinical social worker by trade who focus on geriatrics and nursing homes, totally unrelated. Like, I never was in clinical practice. I did consulting. I worked in healthcare, end of life, chronic illness. Yes, nothing to do with this. During COVID, I was not in the nursing homes. My husband looked at me and he's like, okay, you're not in the nursing homes. Like, what are you doing? You have, your license, we have our foundation. Like, this is a good segue. Why don't you think about opening up a private practice? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'm not sure. I don't know how to do it. So I actually enrolled in an online postgraduate class for licensed mental health clinicians who wanted to focus on reproductive psychology. Great, wonderful class, amazing. I learned so much. And midway through the class, I'm like, I don't know if I want to open up a private practice, but I do have an idea for a book because I felt like I could impact a lot more people through a book rather than just taking clients one-on-one. So it's mid-COVID. We're sitting on an airplane. I think we're going to Mexico because it's so close to California. I'm sitting on the airplane. I have my phone, no joke. I have my phone. I'm like, I have an idea for a book. I jotted it down in notes. I handed it to my husband across the aisle. We were both in aisle seats. He looked at it. He's like, wow, this is good. And he started to get, I won't say he cried. He got teary-eyed and he's like, okay, I approve. I'm like, okay. I showed the kids. They were like, wow, mommy, like, I'm like, what do you think of this? And they said, it shows that you really wanted us and you loved us so much before we were born. I'm like, yes, that's the message. Simple. It's cool. It was like a simple idea. And I was able to connect with like an editor and then connect with a publishing house, like a hybrid publishing house. And basically, my motivation is this. This is kind of like the book that I wish that I had when the kids were born, right? And these are things that I was saying to the kids. And when we were going, like back in the dark ages, when we were going through IVF, like there wasn't a lot of books that existed. And it was books that were wonderful at explaining, like I felt like through animal and imagery, like, infertility and IVF, which I'm thankful for and I'm grateful. And I have a lot of those books, but I felt like we needed to touch on the emotional journey and to really basically start a conversation about a taboo subject. Like at that point, when we went through it, it was like shameful, like, oh, I'm infertile. Oh, I felt like it defined me. I don't think it's that way anymore now because of podcasts like yours and social media and all of these amazing avenues where people are like, they're out in front of it, and they're connecting and networking. And it's like something that unites so many people. And I feel like, I'm an infertility warrior and a survivor. And, there's a much more positive, outward, more public spin on it. But back then I was like, this was like, I was like shameful, And so I want to give parents a tool to have that conversation with their kids and to basically say to them, like, there were parts that were sucked, basically, like it was a struggle. It was a hardship. It wasn't easy. Excuse me. And so I wanted to hand them a tool that says, start to talk to your kids about their journey and the love that existed prior to conception.
I love it. I got a couple, I think I have two. We still read them to her all the time. I have two books that are like to your, I haven't read your book. I'm so excited to buy it and read it, but it's the same, like the journey before they were there. And one of them, we actually went through the adoption process. My daughter's not adopted. That's a whole different story, but we got books like It Had to Be You. And that was a phenomenal book. Or like we do have one book. I don't know, Amanda, if you know, you might have even gotten it for me, but one book that kind of tells the story of it was really hard. We had to like go through like choppy waters and we had to climb the highest mountain. And it does, to your point, it's just nice that that was our experience. And that's what we then get to tell our kids instead of like, mommy and daddy grew you in our, grew you in our tummy and it was really easy. And here you are.
Exactly. It's what it is basically it's a love story, like between parent and child. And so it's like we did all these things and we felt certain ways. Like, and this, that we're always talking to our kids about like expressing, labeling your emotions, right? And like, don't say stop, like when somebody's bothering you, like you have to say, like, it bothers me when, or I feel sad because, really trying to give them this language at an early age so that these conversations that they have the toolkit in front of them. And this is, a conversation and you can utilize it as like a jumping off point, or, if you want to continue the conversation, just kind of like to break the ice. Like, we love you. We felt certain ways. We were resilient. We never gave up. Like these are things that you want to empower your kids with, right? Like there's going to be hardship in life. There's going to be things that are unfair and where you're going to be knocked down, but and you stick with something and hopefully you're going to get that result at the end. So first of all, it's kind of cool to like see your name on Amazon. I'm not.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Okay, what's the name of the book and where can people buy it?
Okay, I should have had the book with me, but I don't. That's a fail on my end.
That's okay. I'm going to get it. So I already have it pulled up on Amazon.
Literally going to be ordering today.
Thank you. It's called Before We Held You in Our Arms. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Books A Million. You'll see the two little characters on the front are supposed to be me and my husband because it's based upon our story. And
it has 26 5-star reviews on Amazon, so it's obviously doing great.
Thank you. Thank you. So basically we decided like this is a passion project of mine. And so 50% of the proceeds from the book are going back to Fight for Kids. So do you want me to go into a little bit about
touch on that? Yeah.
Okay, so Fight for Kids. Remember how I told you the night before our transfer, my husband was like, I'm gonna, donate the amount of money. So basically in 2013, after like we had delivered and the kids were probably like 7, 8 months old, we met with an organization here in LA. And we basically said, like, we went through this, there's a huge issue, it's very costly, and we want to help people fulfill their dreams. So we established a fund called Fight for Kids. The K is for Kara, who's my daughter, and her twin, Zachary. That's why they're at the end. It's the K and the Z are capitalized. I don't know. It's like a little.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. So just so people can find it, it's actually Emily and her husband's last name, Feit, F-E-I-T. Is that right?
Perfect.
And then to your point, kids. So capitalized K-I-D-Z.
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
Thank you. So we established the fund. So the fund is non-denominational. You can be, of any faith. The only stipulation, there are a few stipulations. You have to be a resident of Southern California in order to get to qualify for this loan. There are like some financial parameters. We don't run the fund. It's ran through an interest-free loan organization called Jewish Free Loan. But again, it's non-denominational. You can be a single woman. You can be it can be a couple, like
I really like that. From somebody that's gone through the adoption process, it was very difficult to find agencies that they were all faith-based. And you kind of had to just be like, yeah, I believe in this, or, I believe in that. So that's like really interesting to point out, especially because it does have the Jewish foundation.
Yeah.
So
I think people like, they're like, oh, it's maybe just a Jewish organization, but it's not. Like, and they run, I don't even know how many loan funds that they have. This is just like one caveat. They have loan funds for, small businesses, for healthcare needs, for schooling. And then actually there's a lot of interest-free loan programs throughout the whole country. Like, I think it's been replicated in a few other cities. I want to say there's one in Florida. There might be one in Chicago. I'm probably giving you wrong information, but I know it has been replicated. And so we gave them the amount of money that we had spent, and we've continued to fundraise. So it was established in 2013. We don't always get notified of the babies that were born from the fund, but I believe that there's 50 or 60 babies that have been born that we know of. I think there's a lot more.
That's beautiful.
But it's
Incredible.
the fundraising is always recycling. So as people pay back the funds that they've borrowed in their repayment plan, that's like personally structured based upon need and financial situation, the money gets recycled for the next individual or couple that needs to borrow the money, which is, it's cool. Like, it's a great concept. It's, it's not a grant. It's not a handout. It's like, it's an interest-free loan. So you are borrowing the money, but you're not accruing all of those interest-free fees.
I know we've had listeners, and I've had personal friends that they're doing everything and anything except like IVF, or I don't know, really IVF. And they're like, well, once I can get a second mortgage on my house, we'll start IVF or what, and it's heartbreaking. And it is so heartbreaking. So that's a beautiful option.
Thank you. We're always trying to just raise awareness, raise funds, hopefully inspire other individuals to be philanthropic and to find their like passion and their desire, and to pay it forward. Because thankfully, we felt like, okay, we were in a position, thankfully, but there's needs out there. And if that had been a financial barrier for us, we wouldn't have been able to have our family. And this is like, it's such like an organic and a sweet, like, it's a natural desire to want to create a family.
Absolutely.
So, and actually now I believe this is on the horizon, is there, the Jewish Free Loan, the Feit for Kids is going to offer mental health treatment as well. There's a new partnership, because that's such a critical component as well, going through this process. So, I mean, we're trying to fundraise, we're trying to raise awareness, and hopefully just debunk like a lot of the myths that come with, in the infertility process, and really make it just not as stigmatized, but just make it more of a normal conversation, and to utilize the resources that exist. So
I love it. Your story is so full of hope, and then just the like beautiful resources that you're providing everybody else that's going through it. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us.
first, thank you guys for listening.
Of course. Do you mind sharing how they can like find your foundation and everything, like where they can go to?
Yes, absolutely. So I have a website. It's Emily Feit, EMILY. Feit is spelled F as in Frank, EIT as in Tom. My husband's last name. I had an easy last name.com, and there's links to everything. My book is Before We Held You in Our Arms. That's on, Amazon or Barnes and Noble, Books A Million. But everything is linked up. We're on Instagram, the Feit for Kids Foundation, as well as Facebook. I know I'm old school, I still use Facebook. So it's all linked there. But if you just want to go through my website, there's links to our story. There's some of our videos. It kind of explains, like, in 4 or 5 minutes, kind of the history of the fund and how the fund has kind of transformed over the years.
That's incredible. Well, thank you, Emily. It was so amazing chatting with you today.
Thank you, guys. I think what you're doing is awesome. I mean, I wish I had that you're offering a lifeline to people. And I think that's really, really important. And you're offering such an opportunity to so many people, and you have such a widespread reach. You guys should be so proud of I'm proud of you. I feel like
Thank you.